Hi everyone, Michelle Ferreri here, Member of Parliament for Peterborough, Kawartha, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of People Before Politics. Now, I say this a lot, but I have to tell you this week I'm really excited. This person is a friend, and in this world, in any work world where you are, if you don't have friends, if you don't have connections, work is not, it doesn't matter. You need relationships in the workplace, especially in a workplace where we do what we do every day. And I can remember when I got elected, I was really, or when I was thinking about running, I was really torn because I'm a mom and I was so worried about how I was going to be able to be here, physically be here, which is away from my children, and be there for my children. And it's still the number one barrier and hurdle I have in this job. And Jamie Schmale, who's my neighbor, said, you need to phone Karen Vecchio because she has 5 kids. I was like, oh my gosh, a woman MP who has children. And I phoned her and she spent time with me and it was just like an instant relationship. And so today I'm really excited for you guys to meet and to fall in love, if you haven't already by watching her, Miss Karen Vecchio.
Thanks so much, Michelle. You're so kind.
You are a rock star. So I'm going to give you a little bit of professional background about Karen. So Karen was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Elgin-Middlesex-London in 2015 and re-elected in 2019 and 2021. Karen currently serves as the Shadow Minister or Critic for Women, Gender Equality and Youth. And she's our chair, my chair, on the Standing Committee of the Status of Women, or as we call it, FEWO. She's an unbelievable chair. It is, like, I think, the most collaborative committee we have on Parliament because of her. In her capacity as Member of Parliament, Karen has served as the Deputy House Leader for the Official Opposition, Shadow Minister for Women and Gender Equality, Chair of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, Shadow Minister for Families, Children and Social Development, which is now my file, so she's like my mentor on this, Chair of Conservative Social Development Caucus, and the Conservative Caucus Liaison to the LGBTQ2+ community. She participates regularly in the All-Party Agricultural Caucus and the All-Party Anti-Poverty Caucus, the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Caucus, and the All-Party Parliamentary Group to End Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking, which we're also studying in FEWO right now. This is my favorite part of your bio. Karen was raised on a turkey and hog farm in Sparta. I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing, a turkey and hog, and remains connected to her rural roots in Southern Ontario. Prior to entering politics, she owned and operated a small business in London, worked alongside former Member of Parliament Joe Preston as his executive assistant for 11 years and is married to Mike, and they have 5 children. So Karen's knowledge of process, procedure is outstanding. Like, she's been through it, and that's what you need as a new person. You got to go to these people because it's sometimes extremely toxic here.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can kind of like help navigate that. So I guess my first question to you, Karen, is you are this like voice of reason. If you ever walk through House of Commons, and Karen hugs everybody. Everybody knows Karen. Karen is like the mom of Parliament. That's literally what we call her. But what motivates you to stay in politics?
You know, it's a really, as you said, a really challenging job up here. So there are days that you do want to go home and throw in the towel because of that toxicity, because you feel like you're not moving even a baby step. But it's when you go home and you see how much this country needs us, how much better, can we say that?
Yeah.
How we could be on a different path. And for me, it's about coming up with solutions that actually work. And a lot of times I look at the fact that we don't find balance because people don't talk. You know me, Michelle, I talk. And if you ask my husband, I like to talk it out. I like to fight it out. And that's how we get to solutions. If we're not talking, we're not trying to find a solution. And that's why when in Parliament, I look and I go, are we trying to find a fight or find a solution, or are we fighting? And that's why in the Status of Women, I really focus on that collaboration, where we do need to make changes. And we know that there's some huge issues. We talk about mental health and abuse and sexual assaults and all of these really key things that are impacting families and children every day. That's what I fight for. Those are my family members too, and it's friends, families, communities, and all Canadians. And I just think, how could we do things better?
The question I always ask when I do these interviews is, because most of the people I've had on so far are conservative, and I'm curious, there's this stigma still, I think, that conservatives don't care about social services or mental health and all these things, right? Which you and I both know is very untrue. But you are, one of the most compassionate, caring people I know. But what made you, or when do you feel like when in your life were you like, I'm conservative, and why?
It's interesting because my family, I always grew up as a conservative. But as I was going to university, it was interesting. Actually, in high school, I had people wanting to debate me because they knew I was conservative and they were liberals. And I'm like, what are we debating, right? And policies that, let's just pretend we're debating. We're not debating. But, I went into university there. It was very much, very pro-liberal at the time.
Still is.
Yeah. But for me, I'm really, I just look at down to the community politics. What do communities need? And a lot of times it's people working together. What makes me a conservative? I would say that there's some very strong things. First of all, justice. I look at myself when it comes to our justice and what we see as fairness. I'm very much a conservative in those views. I do believe in tough on crime, but I have a compassionate way of doing it. I believe one strike, you're not actually out, but there's multiple strikes, and we have to have a strong system that way. Fiscal responsibility as a mom. And I think this is the thing, is lots of people think you come as members of parliament because you're rich. Well,
sorry, did I laugh out loud on that one?
So people think we're rich people. And
we can't get milk today, guys. Sorry, I remember that part.
And that's the problem, is I've lived that life from before. We're not American politicians where you need to have these multi-million-dollar campaigns. I ran my nomination for less than $2,000 because I was only willing to spend what I had available to me. And that's another reason I'm a conservative. Not about overspending, spending on necessities. Yeah. So it's the way I run my house, wants versus needs. I pay for needs. If you want something, you go out and pay for it yourself. So I think the fiscal part is very much what makes me a conservative as well. But I live in a rural part of Canada, and I live in southwestern Ontario, huge agricultural background, and I see that as a party that really has the backbone of agriculture and the understanding of agricultural processes and programs that are necessary.
You've been able to really balance as best you can. It's a major hurdle for any mom here to try and I'll tell this story because it's hilarious and it's a classic Karen Vecchio story. And I have done this now myself multiple times since she did it. We were sitting in the house. Karen and I used to be seatmates, and now we're like just a couple people apart, but we were seatmates. And so when you have to vote, you can't leave your chair. So you have to sit there. So you're sitting in it. And Karen's son, do you want me to say which one?
Go ahead.
So Christian was visiting. It was great. And so Christian had to get to the airport. And so he was up in the gallery. Okay, bye, see you later. And so, we're talking. And it's great. Like as seatmates, you really develop really important relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's fine. So all of a sudden, Karen is under her desk. And her cell phone is like this. She's like, yeah, okay, yeah. He's just out front, just a sec. And she's answering an Uber driver because she had ordered the Uber for her son to get to the airport. And she's under the desk on the phone with this Uber driver. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, just a second. Then I'm like, oh, she's momming. She's momming hard right now. And that is the reality of trying to do this job. My kids come home at 3:20 every day. And as soon as they walk through the door, they phone me. Well, where am I at 3:20 every day? I'm sitting in the House of Commons. So I took a page out of Karen Vecchio's book because they know that I can't. But if something's really wrong, so this is my story, we have a security system on our house, and it's the security system phones me. It's like, your fire alarm is going off right now? And this is me in the middle of a vote. And I'm like, yeah. And then you got to stand up and vote. So you stand up and you vote, and you sit down. You're like, okay, I'm not sure. I'm not there right now. And this is the reality of how we do things. But Karen sort of gave me permission to be mom. Because I was like, oh, I could never answer the phone. She's like, you got to do what you got to do, and not that we're telling all the members to do this. But you've been able to find that piece of balance and be a real human in sometimes a very unhuman environment.
Something, it's really interesting because I look at my path over the last 7 years, and I wouldn't have done that on day one.
No.
For sure, I would not have done that. I was even concerned about the smelly hand lotion that I was wearing because, you come into this, it's a place of pomp and circumstance.
Yes.
It's so proud to be there. So when I walked in there, I was making sure I did that. But I'm Karen Vecchio, and I'm not normal, and I will take phone calls under the desk. I will do crazy things because at the end of the day, I think you come here and you're expected to be one thing. I think we have to take off all of those masks and be who we are. I was voted here because I am a mom. Most of the people understand the things we're going through. When we're talking about being a mom, you know, yeah, my son Christian was so brilliant. He knew that if he called at 2 o'clock, that was the beginning of question period, that he could get money really quickly because he didn't have time to respond. So if he had say,
Kids
Mom,
are smart, man.
he'd say, Mom, at lunchtime I have no money. He knew that I'd just throw him a quick $10. It was that simple. Well, then at the end of the month, when I start looking at how many times,
he calls
and then
at
at
2
what
o'clock.
time, I'm like, you've got this planned, buddy. So
Christian, good on you, my friend.
he and I have a very good relationship on that. He knows how to do this. But at the same time, I look at the fact that I've been doing this since he was 11 years old.
Yeah.
He has grown up in this circle too. And as a parent, and it's interesting because I think a lot of politicians, knowing I'm a mom, they will share with me what they're going through with their own kids.
Yes.
And sometimes it's dads, sometimes it's moms. But I really find that there's been a huge impact for politicians' children that was never there before. That because there's social media, because there's so much of this stuff going around, people know that Christian's my son. People know my kids. And so I'm not just being scrutinized, but all of my family is being scrutinized. So yeah, Mama Bear's going to be there all the time because when I took this journey, they didn't know what to expect. And so I have to also help protect them and sometimes finance them for their lunches.
Hear to that. You know, that's a really good segue. And today is I think today, Karen, on the day when we're shooting this video, may be one of the most, it is, I think, the most important day since I've been elected. And it's a very emotional day, to be honest, because I went into politics because I believe that we have a severe mental health and addiction crisis. We have a severe public safety crisis, and we have a severe financial crisis.
Absolutely.
And all of those things are like a web. And today, when you're watching this, I don't know when you're watching this, but on this day when we record it, we have put forth an opposition day motion, which means we are putting forth we're forcing a vote in the House to ask the Liberals to redirect their funding of safe supply into treatment and recovery. And Karen is an outstanding human because she understands this probably better, and I've seen and witnessed and take great pride in you sharing. There's my kid phoning me right there. Watch this. Just hang on one sec. Hello? Hello? I'm just doing a video. Are you okay?
This
Hello?
is normal. This is just what life's
Hello?
all about.
I'm just in the middle of doing a video. Can I call you back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah, I missed the bus.
So
Okay.
I could probably
Okay, I'll
on the
talk to
show
you later.
because this is the kind of stuff we
But
do.
that's
We're
the
moms.
reality of it. So because I'm their primary person, it's like you got to know that. Anyway, he's fine. He just missed the bus. So Karen's personal experience, and she's given me permission to share. Like, how do you feel about safe supply because you have personal experience with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think first of all, I have this life coach just for anybody. Having issues, having to have counseling, sitting down with people because you just don't get it is really, really important. So I have this life coach. Her name's Sarah. I love her. And we talk about the challenges I'm going through because not only am I my mom, but I'm also a member of parliament, so making really important laws.
Imagine us wearing more than one hat.
I know. So I talk to her all the time on different things. And a lot of times I'll say, I think I'm crazy because I have these feelings on certain things. But when it comes to drugs and addictions and mental health, the complexity is so there. And I think a lot of times the missing key is they're not talking about families and the impact to a family.
Yep.
And I don't think they recognize that when one person hurts, everybody's hurting. And you know, we need to help that entire family, not only the person who has that addiction, but the entire family.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to addiction, they have, right now, the Liberals really believe that by providing a safe supply, that this will help. But the bottom line is you can continue to give a person a drug, but if there's no detox, if there's no rehabilitation or recovery accessible or access to any of these programs, the person will continue to use. And there's many different philosophies on this, and I've spoken to a person who has an addiction, and it's an active, always active. It's a journey, and one day will be different from the next, and 1 hour can be different from what happened. You never know what's going to trigger or cause trauma, which may make that person go and want to use. So when they come out with this idea of providing safe supply, especially when we're talking about fentanyl versus other types of opioids or hydromorphone, They do not understand that there's almost a top of the food chain, and fentanyl is that top. So by providing things like Oxycontin, and not Oxycontin, but the hydromorphone, it's actually not helping that person who is having that craving for that fentanyl. And I had some really interesting talks, and even some organizations that are very, very approving of safe supply. But they need to listen to the other side. And there is a huge other side to this issue, where if you have a child that needs to look for resources and you're calling, you're not going to be able to find that detox bed. It might be a month, it might be 6 months. There may not be something for hours away from where you need that help. In our own community of St. Thomas, there is not a detox bed. People need to go to London. So we're taking a population of 40,000 people and having to go into a city where there's 420,000 people, all scrambling for those same detox beds. And then we look at the recovery and the rehabilitation. People who cannot access them because sometimes the cost is just too much. To get into one of the publicly funded ones in Ontario right now, it's about 9 months to get into a program that could be about 3 weeks long. But addiction just doesn't, that 3 weeks is once again not enough. We need to look at not only short term but long term, but what do we help when people get out of recovery? We need to make sure that there's peer supports. We need to make sure that there's peer supports for parents who understand, triggers. You and I are really fortunate because we've had a lot of trauma training. But I think to a parent who has not heard other people's stories and are just living in that moment, the chaos in their own lives. You're worrying about your your other children. You're worrying about a child that might be overdosing, and at the same time, you have to work and you've got to put food on the table. So when you're talking about the complexity about that, it doesn't matter if it's your child suffering. It could be your spouse who is suffering, who has lost their job and moving and using more drugs or alcohol. It could be anything. But it's such a complex web, and that finances, housing and security, all of these things come together. But the idea of a safe supply is such here's a quick solution that's not going to fix the problem, because unless we have rehabilitation and recovery, there is not a chance for that person to get off those drugs. And ultimately, when a person is trying to get off those drugs, there are things that you can use. They talk about Suboxone. There's products that can be used. There are things that we can do. But I don't think we sit down with addicts or their families, because that support system is needed to say, how can we do this? What is the plan? There's no planning for these individuals. They're seen as numbers. Let them get their safe supply, send them back on the streets. And in some cases, some people may be using those. But we do know a lot of this is now being diverted to others so that people can take that money and buy that fentanyl that they really wanted.
It's so hard because I feel like you're challenging people to rethink what they thought they knew. They were sold an idea. They were sold a marketing idea.
Yeah.
And if I was to give anyone a public education tool, watch the series Dope Sick.
Yeah.
Addiction is the most vicious predator on its host that I think exists. And I have dealt with so many families and moms, and they've lost their kids. And all you're trying to do is keep them alive. And so you try all the things. You try tough love. You get out of the house, and then you say, well, come back. Whatever you need, I just need you to stay alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is such a heartbreaking disease that I feel like it is just rampant. And it doesn't even matter anymore what your socioeconomic background is. It doesn't care.
No.
Like, the people who are suffering from this and our young kids who are like so vulnerable, like to vaping or this is a tough conversation.
It's really tough, and I think what's happened though is when we grew up, it was a different time, right? These drugs,
The physiological dependence on this fentanyl cannot be understated.
absolutely. You cannot, and this is where we get into the codependency too, because codependency is another issue, where sometimes it's drug user to drug user, sometimes it's family member, but it's where your happiness all depends on that person as well. And so that's where we see a lot of parents that are struggling because they're very dependent on their child's health, which then in turn makes them very sick. So there is a vicious circle that goes on here.
Like, as a parent, it's such a a mean, twisted thing to do, because you're so emotionally involved. You love someone so much. You can't even make rational, really, decisions, right? Like, it is really tough.
Yeah.
But permissive parenting, that line between enabling, empowerment, and compassion is like, it's like a thin, thin hair.
Oh, it's thinner than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I try to figure that out. What is enabling? What is, I love you, let's make sure we eat together, making sure that they have
Yeah.
nutrition, brushing their teeth.
Yeah.
To some people, I don't think they understand that brushing your teeth is a very big deal. Sometimes getting out of bed just doesn't happen. You think about all of that hygiene care.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what is enabling to make sure that, that person who has an addiction is clean, is healthy, is eating, compared to, well, are you enabling them now? Well, you might want them just to have a square meal because that's a positive thing. I look, and for myself, I really look at those beeps. Beeps and blips. For me, it's important because I always say I will fight so that those days of giggling and happiness are going to be there. But it does come with sometimes very, very tough love. We need to have boundaries. But sometimes when you have an addict that's pushing those boundaries, you also are going to start losing yourself. And that's why statistics show, and it's unbelievable, the number of people that get in and have addictions themselves who are helping an addict increases significantly. Divorces are between people who have an addicted child. I think it's either 72% or 78%.
Wow, I don't doubt
These
it.
numbers are huge. But the one thing that really got me was the addict. People who have children who have addictions, they themselves get an addiction because they then are trying to drown their problems.
It's pain. It's pain
painful.
management.
It's-
Whether it's physiological pain
Yeah.
or psychological pain, it's an escape.
Yeah.
And it's
It's really complex, and that's why you have to look at all of the things that come. So the abuse, when we talk about physical abuse, all of those things that happen, and how it becomes just a really toxic environment, all in all.
I've never seen the House in my time here as charged as it has been this week when talking about addiction.
Well, I think in that House, you have some people who have real experience themselves, who have had addictions. You have family members who have addictions. And then you have some people also who are looking from the outside in. I think you're going to see a lot of the charge because some people are very emotionally invested in this. They want to see change for Canadians. And some people are just saying, this is our ideology and we're going to fight because we think you're wrong. As a Conservative, I'm really proud of how we're approaching this, because I will sit there and I question them. You are talking about safe supply. That will make it longer. They're not dead yet. That's correct. They're not dead yet. But we need to have those rehabilitation places because people aren't able to get into those. So how are we getting them? I always feel like the government comes out with something and it's always putting the cart before the horse. For many years, they've talked about Portugal. And Portugal, what they did was they had made sure rehabilitations and recoveries were there first. We also have to look at the geography.
Portugal did not have fentanyl.
And then that's the thing. But they're looking at, they put this in, but this was years ago, and they didn't have the fentanyl crisis that we have here today. We've got so many issues, and the fentanyl in the streets are real. And so when people are trying to, I think the problem is, instead of saying you're wrong, which we always get, we're wrong, we're heartless, you're not being compassionate, we have a different way of looking at it. And that's okay. And I think sometimes we're not looking to try to find, or I don't think the government's trying to find a balance on here. It's you're right or wrong. And that they have to look at and say, this project or this pilot that we worked throughout isn't working. I think a lot of times it's hard to swallow the pride when you think you did something right and it didn't work out. And I think that's what we're seeing with the safe supply, that the intention, the theory is there, not criticizing the theory, but then in reality, you're dealing with addictions. You're dealing with people whose state of mind is about getting that next hit. And it's not about going out and smoking a joint or getting hydromorphone. It's about getting that hit that they expected and that their body is now used to. The chemical, the wiring in the brain, everything's changed in there. I really appreciate the work that's being done. I know that you've met the doctor in St. Thomas who for many years...
I was just going to bring her up.
Yeah, and for many years has talked about addictions, and you and I can have that conversation. I remember her coming into my office, and I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't the doctor who was selling something totally different 20 years ago. But now she's been doing this. So you tell more, because you've had some great conversations with her as well.
She's amazing, right? She was quoted in the Adams Evo article that's in the National Post. I think you hit the nail on the head, Karen, and it's like we really are forcing people to challenge what they think they know. And that's very, very hard. When you've wrapped around your identity or you thought you were doing the right thing and somebody comes along and says, no, not only is it the wrong thing, it's killing people. That is very hard. And so this article came out, but this doctor that Karen is referring to, I had a chance to tour Karen's writing. It was amazing, by the way. And she came to lunch with us. And this woman was like, safe supply. Like she was a public officer of health. And she has completely done a 180. She
100%.
said it is the thing that is killing people.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is, we don't hear enough of her voices.
Because they're vilified.
They're being vilified.
I want to just read this to you because I got to go speak in the House, but I want to show you this person has worked in drug treatment and recovery for decades. And they do not want me to use their name because anyone who speaks out about this is vilified. This person also has actively told me how much they do not like conservatives, how they dislike Pierre Poilievre. And this is the message today when I reached out to this person to say, we are calling on the government to reverse their funding to Safe Supply and put it into treatment and recovery. They said, I have to agree with him, Pierre Poilievre, 100%. But for people speaking out against it, you become vilified like we don't care about people. Hydromorphine doesn't even come close to the strength of fentanyl. I had one young fellow tell me if someone dies from an overdose, people are trying to find out who the dealer is so they can purchase from them because of the strength. We are just throwing gasoline on the fire each step. Each step was supposed to make it better, and this whole thing about saving lives, perhaps prolonging death, is more like it. To watch young people walking around the city like zombies is heartbreaking.
Prolonging death, that hit the nail on
Palliative
the
care.
head. Yeah, it's the nail on the head. We know that we could be doing so much better. The thing is, a person who has an addiction and wants to continue to be an addict, this is a great program for them. But a person who wants to get on the other side, there is nothing available to them.
But for people watching, the critics, they will say you can't make an addict. And this is another thing, people get really worked up about the word addict, which I'd love you to chime in on. But it's like you can't make somebody dealing with addiction want to recover. They have to choose.
They have to choose.
So then how do you have that argument?
And that's, I know Alberta's trying some different things. It's all of the state of the mind. And addict, as you said, that word was really intensified in the House of Commons on calling somebody an addict. And it's such a complex thing as well. So I know the other day I was listening to people saying how heartless we're being for calling people with addictions addicts. I'm going to remind people, though, that every single time you go to a community organization where you're getting help with your addictions, it will be, hi, my name is Karen Vecchio, and I am an addict. I'm not the addict, but I'm just saying that's exactly what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you don't name
the
it.
ownership of calling yourself an addict is owning the problem, and that is what they're being told. Many people who, these conversations of calling somebody an addict, people, you just don't want to, I guess the words, you just don't want to own it. You don't want to believe it's true. And believing it's true and saying it makes it real for some of these people. So, I believe in softer language, but at the same time, that is the word. Owning it, being an addict, you own that. And it's going to be something that they will hold the rest of their lives. It's not like an addiction goes away because they're going to outgrow it. It's with them for the rest of their lives. And so that's something that they realize, that as people are, my uncle had an addiction. He, for 35 years, never drank. Way to go, right? But he chose not to drink because he knew that one drop could entice him potentially. So he made that choice. And, I think people are scared to talk about addictions, but I think if we all look back into our families, many addictions.
I don't think it's untouched in
I
any
don't think
family.
it's untouched. And I think the thing is pride. So many people are
Shame.
Shame and stigma.
Shame is the undercurrent of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's shame, I was wrong. Shame, I endorsed something that didn't work. And I think a sign of growth and maturity is when you can sort of step back and be like, okay, yeah, you know what, I did try that. it didn't work, and I want to do better. And that is what I think we are asking everyone, especially the Liberals. Just please stop doubling down, and the data is coming out. Stop silencing and vilifying the people who know this world. The frontline workers that I deal with, paramedics, cops, police, they're terrified to publicly speak out, even though they completely disagree.
Well, it's interesting. I've heard them talk about everybody that's agreeing, and it's interesting because I don't think I've spoken to those individuals. I've spoken to people who talk about the fact that we have a criminal justice system that's failing and bail reform that's failing.
That's right.
These are the types of things that I'm hearing. So it's interesting. I don't know who they're talking to, but it's not the same people that I'm talking to within my own riding.
Karen Vecchio, you convinced me that I could be a mom and an MP. It's not easy, but anything worth doing isn't easy.
I agree.
You are a really important piece of the Conservative Party, and I'm really lucky to call you my friend. And I'm really glad you came here today. What would I ask you would be your pie in the sky when you're done here? What would you like to have said you achieved?
It's interesting, but to be honest, I think it's just that the value of people, that we understand the value of people. So whether we're working in, I came here not thinking I'd be working on status of women. I came here and I remember being told, you're going to have status of women. I'm like, oh, what's that mean?
I had that moment too.
Yeah. But instead I decided I'm going to own it.
Yeah.
And from owning it, I realized how much disparity there is, things when it comes to intimate partner violence, things like that, the justice system. That to me is that pie in the sky. When we know that women are free from abuse, that is when I think that there's a victory. So I've got a long road to go, I think.
Yeah. No, we'll have it all fixed up by 5 o'clock tonight.
Okay,
no problem.
fantastic.
No problem.
But that's a win for me.
Okay, favorite movie?
Oh my God. Okay, so Pretty Woman. I love
solid
Pretty Woman.
choice.
But people will say, oh, but I'm like, no, but I love it. I
It's a
love
solid choice.
romance.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Favorite food?
Chicken. Just chicken.
That's a boring answer.
I know. Just give me chicken in all different
Not
forms.
turkey and hawks?
Well, I grew up. I grew up on a pig farm. Can you imagine trying to date this? I grew up on a pig farm. We had 20,000 turkeys, 2,000 pigs. Our farm smelled, and there was flies everywhere. So getting a date could have been very, very difficult for me. But yeah, I grew up on pork and turkey. We ate that all the time.
Do you like it now?
I love it.
Oh, you still do?
I love it.
Karen Vecchio, everyone, if they want to follow you on social media, how do they do it?
It's KarenVecchioMP.ca for my website, Karen_Vecchio for Twitter, and Facebook, Karen Vecchio, Member of Parliament, Elgin-Middlesex-London.
She's one of a kind, folks. She's a great, great human. Thank you so much for watching this episode of People Before Politics. Make sure you share. You can watch all of the episodes we've done on all the platforms that you can stream on, but we'd love you to share, comment, and tell your friends. Thanks for watching.